this conversation we're having today, it's a combination of art. As you both know, I'm a visual artist, but I'm also a writer as well in my own way. And
Yes, yeah.
yeah, I am my own kind of writer. I suppose being in this world and just doing life the way I do, I love writing. I love I think communication and reaching out to people, networking, and just more than networking, connecting. Uh,
Mm, mm,
Connecting and forming meaningful connections. I think it's
mhm.
vital for our survival as human beings. Or
Right. Yeah.
else, yeah, or else there's going to be well, you can see what we're facing. It will be
Mhm,
mass erasure of that which matters to us, a different kind of people in the world, because there's such a movement to destroy diversity, to destroy storytelling, to destroy our art and artifacts that tell
mhm,
stories of a group of people who didn't have a voice at some point in history. But
mhm,
it took those who came with another kind of ethos. You
mm.
know, in life, it's a once in a lifetime thing. When you get
Yeah.
that level of bravery, it's I don't
Mm,
care what happens. I'm
mhm.
pushing till the story is told, and I can see that in both of you. I
Yeah.
mean, Uma's given uh, her life to telling the story during her retirement, and
Mhm.
Rory, you've given your life through your art, from acting. I mean, you had the glamorous life. You went to Hollywood. You did a Disney movie. You've basically done all of that, and you've had
Yes.
all the accolades. But I know the activist in you. So let's
Mm.
get right into it. I'm going to do the introduction of both of you for Facebook, and
Okay.
yeah, and then we'll move right into the conversation. How's that? You both comfortable? You
Yeah.
happy?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So welcome to Professor Uma Dhupelia-Mesthrie and Rorisang Motuba. Welcome to the People of Purpose talk show. Here you will be loved. We are big on kindness and compassion and just sharing love and telling stories from real people, because those stories must move through the world authentically. That's when we'll see the change, because we want people to hear your version of it. So,
Yeah.
welcome to both of you. I'm very honored to have you on board, and everybody who helps me on the People of Purpose talk show welcomes you as well. Thank you both for coming and for accepting this invitation. I am humbled.
Oh, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
being here again. It's lovely. Thank you.
Welcome. So, can I quickly do the quick Facebook introduction? It's going to be a little long today because Uma's story is quite
Yes.
extensive, and Rory, your play is attached to history. So, therefore, I have to tell that component with a bit of you. So, and while we're doing the chat, well, everything's going to just form the beautiful artwork. Remember, I'm the artist, you both are my paints, and now I'm
Yes.
painting, I'm painting this show together. So I'm going to begin now with the introduction. So
Thank you.
welcome to everybody who is watching us on Facebook, on the live stream. Thank you all for supporting this show. Thank you for showing us love and just being there. You may not say anything, you may watch anonymously. That's okay too, as long as you're receiving this beautiful message. So today we have two very special guests, Professor Uma Dhupelia-Mesthrie of the Western Cape. She lives and works in Cape Town. She's a retired professor from the University of the Western Cape, where she actually worked for 40 years. And well, she arrived in the Western Cape for 40 years. Uma, am I correct in saying you worked at the university for 30 years?
You're close to 30 years,
Close to
yes.
30 years. So that's almost a lifetime. And so Professor Dhupelia-Mesthrie has recently, well, she published a book, but she recently received a very prestigious award for the book. And that's what Phoenix Settlement, A History Through Letters, has been honored with the National Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences Award for Best Nonfiction edited volume in 2025. This comprehensive 660-page work offers an in-depth exploration of the Phoenix settlement established by Mahatma Gandhi in 1904 near Durban, South Africa. The settlement was a communal experiment reflecting Gandhi's principles of cooperative living, ethical existence, and non-violent resistance. The book features nearly 300 letters spanning 60 years from 1915, sourced from 28 archives worldwide, including England, America, Australia, India, and South Africa. Over 130 of these letters have been newly translated from Gujarati into English, providing fresh insights into the settlement's history. Welcome, Uma, again, and welcome to our audience who will be watching Uma's version of today's People of Purpose talk show. It's very powerful, and I encourage you all to just stay on the show to hear what she has to say. So I was also very blessed and honored to have been invited to the Phoenix settlement. This was January 2024. I think it was 120 years later after the Mahatma arrived there. And my host was a South African luminary in the struggle sphere and the political sphere, Dr. Ila Gandhi, who is the aunt of our esteemed guest today, Professor Uma Dhupelia-Mesthrie. And Dr. Ila invited me and my husband to the museum, and we were actually driven there by our very dear friend, Linda Mbonambi, and we spent the most beautiful day there. And Ila gave us the most amazing curated tour of the museum. She actually inspired me so much because Ila is a walking history textbook of the Gandhi story and all the art pieces and artifacts in the museum. She told everything to us in detail and just the history of the settlement. And so I was inspired to make the short documentary, The Next Gandhi Movie. And I collaborated with musicians from Durban, Zawadi, and Carolyn, who actually are social cohesion stars in Durban. They sing in Gujarati and Zulu, isiZulu, and they sing Indian music and Zulu music, and they cross over. It's quite beautiful. But this particular song was of Ila's choice. It's the score of my short documentary, and everything was produced, the music was produced, that is, in a studio in KwaMashu, the K-Cap studio. So the collaboration kind of moved from the Western Cape to Durban. And I did all the editing and the production of the short documentary in my studio in the Garden Route, which is where I live and work. And this documentary has reached the world. I haven't won any awards, but I have had it move across the world. It went to America. It went to film festivals in the US. It went to film festivals in Europe. It's been to Mexico, and it's living forever on YouTube. So I'm very grateful to have Professor Uma Dhupelia-Mesthrie on the show, because she adds another level to my inspiration gathered from that moment when I whipped out my iPad and my iPhone and started filming Ila as she told the story and just recording the various museum artifacts based on the evidence of the story, it was fascinating. So that is how I am connected to my new friend today, Uma. And we both actually just discovered that we're both citizens of the Western Cape. And so we have lovely Rorisang Motuba from Gauteng, another beautiful province in South Africa, and she's from the city of Johannesburg. So the phrase, "you strike a woman, you strike a rock," comes from the 1956 Women's March in South Africa, where 20,000 women of all races marched to the Union buildings in Pretoria to protest the apartheid-era pass laws. It became a symbol of women's resilience, strength, and resistance against oppression. Rorisang Motuba's play, You Strike a Woman, You Strike a Rock, builds on this legacy. It was originally written by Selo Maseko and first staged in 1986, telling the stories of South African women who stood up against injustice. The play highlights the struggles and triumphs of women who fought for freedom, justice, and equality. Given Rorisang's background as a playwright, director, and actress, her interpretation has brought fresh energy to the story, making it relevant for today's audience. Rorisang Motuba, celebrated actress, director, and playwright, is no stranger to the People of Purpose talk show. And today she is here to talk about her play, You Strike a Woman, You Strike a Rock. So that is our big introduction in what I call a nutshell. So it was a lot. I couldn't do it in a lesser way because you both have very big stories to tell. So as much as I can in the hour that we have for this show, I needed to put that into perspective. So shall we dive in? And I'll start with a question for Uma. So today's show is called Echoes of Resistance, Stories that Shape Our World Through Art and History. So Uma, how are you today, firstly?
I'm very well. I'm kind of just getting back, my feet on the ground after, the award. And so just settling into and absorbing what the implications of the award is. I also am so glad to hear your background because I actually have seen your documentary and I was so impressed with it. And I think
Wow.
especially the song that you got made, especially, it's a very famous song of Gandhi's, prayer that
Yes.
he sang and we sing every year on his birthday. But the unusual thing was the way you put it in English and in the Hindi and in the Zulu. I thought that was so innovative, and it's one of the most beautiful compilations I've ever listened to. So it's very good, and I'm also happy to be with Rorisang because I'm also interested in the role of women in resistance in South African history.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Uma. And I must tell you about that song. I fell in love with the song when I heard it. And it was Ila's choice. When I told Ila I was making a documentary, well, a short documentary. I've never made a documentary before. That was my first attempt. And of course, it was an art documentary because I first submitted it to an art gallery in New York. And from there, it went to all the film festivals. But that song was actually produced and performed and put together by these amazing musicians in the city of Durban. So they lent me the song because that's how we all work together. We collaborate. But I actually interviewed Carolyn and Zawadi on the People of Purpose talk show. And I loved that they're spreading social cohesion. It's the same concept you spoke about. I loved that they brought in Gujarati and Zulu. And they were working, this is how they work together. They recently come back from India, so they spread that message. It's very cohesive. It's what we need, not just in South Africa, but around the world, especially since diversity is under such threat. So therefore, I thought it would be so beautiful to use that song with Ila. Ila, what song shall we use? And she said, I love that. So that's how it became the score for my short documentary. And of course, I did all the editing and I put the whole short movie together in my studio. And as I said, it's forever on YouTube. So please share it and let the world know that story because I think it's very powerful too. So, Uma, your book, Gandhi's African Legacy, Phoenix Settlement, 1904 to 2024, recently won the National Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences Award for Best Nonfiction Edited Volume. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What does yes, you did well here, and it's remarkable because so many generations going forward will benefit from this, including the one we currently all living in, because the story has to be told. It's more important than ever right now. So, Uma, what does this recognition mean to you? And how do you hope it impacts the way people engage with Gandhi's African legacy?
So, on a personal level, this is quite a significant recognition of my work, which is, as I said, it took me about 6 years of hard work compiling the documents, editing, hoping to get a publisher, and finally it's out. And it's a 600 plus page book, and I was worried who's going to read it. I also thought, maybe the impact of it will be in future years, maybe 10 years' time. But actually, to get recognition almost a few months after the book was published is really significant. It's also important for my university because it's a recognition for the scholarship of the university. But most importantly, it is important for Phoenix Settlement, which is a national heritage site. And by me winning the award, it draws attention to a very important site, which is really the embodiment of all Gandhian values. So that I see as the most significant consequence of the award.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Uma. And so we'll move the conversation to Rorisang. Congratulations, Rorisang.
Thank you.
On the great success of the play which you directed, You Strike a Woman, You Strike a Rock, the title of which comes from the 1956 Women's March, as I mentioned earlier. So, Rorisang, it has become a symbol of women's resilience, strength, and resistance against oppression.
Yes.
So, what inspired you to bring this powerful phrase to life on stage?
Well, I was approached by the Joburg Theatre to direct this play, which was written, the first staged 40 years ago. So it is one of our South African classic plays, and certainly was a huge part of what we call protest theatre, in this country. And they said the Joburg Theatre thought that it was very important for us to stage this play because, which made me very, very happy. It's actually become a set work now in schools. So drama students, particularly in high school, will be studying this play and unpacking it. And I thought, what a wonderful opportunity that students will be studying this and writing exams on this, and then they can get to actually watch it, my version, our version, and interpretation of it. So I absolutely was very honored when they asked me to stage this play, and obviously had natural moments of feeling intimidated by such a classic work, such a big moment in our history. But the more that we worked it, the more I realized just how vital and important it is to have this play staged now. So it was a tremendous honor and a blessing, and it remains still as relevant now as it did many, many years ago.
Thank you, Rory. That was beautiful. And I'm just very interested in protest theatre. You want to tell us more?
Yes. So, in some of the darker times, of our country's very complex history, there was a lot of freedom of expression was not allowed, and how non-white people were able to protest against our apartheid government was one of the ways was through art, and one of those ways was through theater, right? So we could have these plays where they spoke about oppression, where they spoke about the racism, the lynching, the murder, the theft of our land, the struggle that we were going through, and put it under the expression of this is our creative expression, and it actually was a very brave and courageous moment that artists were undertaking, because if you hear stories of Dr. John Gunny, when they were doing their plays, and they would stage their plays, and the police would be waiting backstage to arrest them afterwards because it was illegal to protest, so they were really putting literally their bodies on the line. To protest against, the inhumanity of what we were living through. And so protest theater, in terms of, the aesthetic of it, it's very simple in terms of props. So a lot of multiple characters, very minimal props. It's a lot of physical work that the actors do because we're just trying to tell the stories through our minds, through our bodies, and through our spirits. So it wasn't these massive productions with revolving stages and things like that. That was only came later. That was a luxury that we didn't have at the time. And so it really was about the storytelling. It was about the art of storytelling, which we as Africans know all too well and very well. We do very, very well also. So that is the essence of protest theatre, and that is why it has lived on. It continues to be staged all over the world. I know that there's American interest in staging Sizwe Bandi is dead even now, and so protest theatre will live on because it is a part of our history and our education.
Thank you very much, Rory. That was so informative. And
Thank you.
we will definitely continue this discussion, perhaps have a whole show on protest theatre. I think it's needed now more than ever. So,
Absolutely.
thank you. Uma, moving the conversation back to you. As a historian, you've spent years researching and documenting Gandhi's legacy. But beyond your academic work, you are also his great-granddaughter. How has this personal connection shaped your perspective on his life and the Phoenix settlement?
So, my focus on Phoenix settlement is a very personal one because I've been extremely fond of the settlement. Having spent many, many years of my childhood and adolescence and young adulthood at Phoenix settlement, my grandmother lived there. And so as kids, we would go to the settlement. And obviously, we knew this land was owned by my great-grandfather. But slowly we got to know that, he wasn't just my great-grandfather, but he was famous and venerated throughout the world. So that already began to see the personal and the bigger historical figure. But, so the story is actually a love story for Phoenix settlement. That's what it is. It's to provide 120 years history, but I'm not just the great-granddaughter. I am a historian by training. And so I am not telling a hagiography, a story that is full of hagiography, but it is actually a story rooted in history with evidence, and it is critical. And so the historian in me dominates. I actually hate works that are one-sided or have a particular agenda to fulfill. I did not ignore any evidence that was contrary or that would bring, judgment against the Gandhi family. I weighed up all the evidence and put everything into the book. So I would say that it is the historian in me dominated, but the project is a work of personal love.
Beautiful, beautiful. And how do you see it affecting the generations to come, or just changing the generations to come in terms of perception?
You see, I think it's important to understand what are the universal values behind Phoenix settlement, because these are values, that are not just for Gandhi's time, but it's for all time. So they are, and I'm hoping that when people read this, they began to understand the values behind Phoenix settlement. Although it's a national heritage site, I think besides people knowing that Gandhi lived here, they don't really know what the values that underpinned it. And one of the biggest reasons it was set up, because he wanted to set up a cooperative society that was actually, a resistance to colonial society and segregation. So in this 100 acres, he tried to bring people of different races, different languages, different religions, caste, class, women, men, children. And so it is quite a unique settlement in colonial times, but it has a resonance through South African history, because apartheid was also based on segregation and demeaning Black people, whereas the settlement was about affirming your own heritage, your own culture, and also providing resistance to society. So it was a very forward-looking settlement. And it has all the values that encompasses Gandhi, ethical living, living in harmony with the environment, living for the welfare of all people, not just individual pursuits, but how do we live in society where we can benefit the majority, all the people, not just a select few of the people. And so this is why I think these are the universal values that I see that will, resonate. Gandhi just didn't see these values as just being linked to a place. They all evolved at a place, but he saw it as a mobile project where these ideas can be taken to different places and I would say to different times.
Beautiful, beautiful. And, more than ever in history, in an age where, the aspiration is to be like the 1%, super rich, and flaunt it in the face of your starving neighbor. I think your book is so relevant for the times. And Rory, your protest theater, wow, it's lighting up my heart. It's just lighting up my heart. It's beyond our understanding how the world has turned out. But then if we look at history, this has happened throughout history. And it's often said that to look at the wrong and to say nothing is to be complicit. It's to be complicit. Because we cannot afford to be complicit in the face of such adversity when our freedoms are being threatened, our basic human rights are being threatened. Therefore, I see your work. And Uma, I see you as an artist because you wrote that book and you compile those letters. We have a history in our family. It's quite sad. My great grandparents during the Union of South Africa, they left South Africa to go to India. And they took my grandfather's eldest brother, but there were other siblings. There were about four or five of them left back. So they just took the elder child and they left the younger children behind. But when they got to India, what happened was that law was passed not to allow them back into the country. And that's how my family, I'm a great grandchild of that tragedy.
Right.
And it's all recorded in my grandfather's diaries, and one cousin in the family has it. You're inspiring me to tell him, and he's an academic in his own right to become a historian with those letters and diaries and all my grandfather's input on a time of history that was completely lost to us. Nobody knew about these things, but my granddad was recording the pain and the tragedy of our family. And of course, everybody's grown in stature through the years. But I feel we should never forget our histories, the pain and everything. Tell it all. If we want to set ourselves free, we need to know the whole story. And the truth shall set us free. So thank you, Uma, for that, because this conversation with you is going to have me on the phone with my cousin, encouraging him to go forth and publish a book like yours. Because I'd love to connect him with you. I would really love, because he's also got an academic background and you're a historian. And I think it would be very interesting if you both start conversations as well, even if you just encourage him to write for the family and for the country and the world, especially now. We need to tell our truths because there is that part of the world that wants to dim our values, our purpose, and our history. We shall no longer be slaves. We shall no longer be people in the shadows. That will never happen again in history. And therefore, art, and whether it's visual art, performing art, or literature, it adds another dimension to life. And that's what I think coming forth from today's conversation. So,
Mhm.
Uma, another question for you. With over 300 letters sourced from 28 archives, what were some of the most surprising discoveries?
So, the book focuses on Phoenix settlement and what happens to it after Gandhi leaves in 1914. So the letters are from people who lived at Phoenix settlement and who they deal with the daily running of Phoenix settlement. So the letters that really stood out for me and came as quite a surprise were the letters of both Sushila Gandhi and Ila Gandhi. In fact, what the book does, and it actually resonates with the Rorisang's work
Mm-hmm.
about women and the untold stories about women and focusing on women. So, there are over 70 letters written by Sushila Gandhi, who was my grandmother, that were in Gujarati. Now, I knew my grandmother my earliest memories of her is her walking around at Phoenix Settlement, me holding her sari and following her. And I remember the earliest childhood memory that I have is of her going to the printing press building, where the printing press had shut down. And she was busy talking to somebody, and I could just see the machines. And as a child, probably 5 or 6 years old, I wasn't aware of the immensity of that moment for her when the press had to be shut down. But I knew she was special, as a grandmother, she's a storyteller and, she made us laugh. She was full of humor. But I could see there was a bit of importance about her because she was running 100 acres on her own. But the letter still came as a shock to me because within 10 years of her coming from India, she was already a close partner with her husband in running the printing press. The letters show her full recognition of the importance of running Indian opinion that was started by Gandhi. It showed her as an equal partner with her husband, who was the editor of the paper. It shows her as somebody who had vision. She was a strong woman, and her letters are about what is this newspaper about? What can we do to make it better? And then, after her husband dies in 1956, she takes over and she becomes the first women editor of the press, the first trustee of Phoenix Settlement. And in all her letters, we see her strength. You see, because these letters are in Gujarati, she was a person who didn't speak English very well. So, you know what English does? It actually excludes. And so you don't see the strength of a person who speaks in their own language with such strength. You just notice the broken English. And so here are the letters written by this woman in Gujarati. And when it is translated, it reveals her whole personality. So, and to come to my aunt Ila Gandhi, everybody knows her as a very soft-spoken person. So she's very soft, and what it hides actually is the strength of her personality. So we always say she's soft, but she's as hard as steel. And so in the letters, what is quite surprising, she's about 33 years old and, also taking a part at Phoenix Settlement, but she also suffered bannings and house arrest. And so the letters reveal the personal suffering that she had to undergo. But what is surprising is the way she deals with the Minister of Justice. She says, you're the Minister of the Justice, but you're a man, you're a father and a husband, and you should know what the impact of this legislation is. When she asks for her house arrest orders, which meant she couldn't take her children to museums, go for picnics, they were housebound at Phoenix Settlement. There was no entertainment. That's what house arrest meant. And so she writes to the minister that I am a mother of 5 children. And so her, when her husband's office is bombed, she writes to the minister that we need to have an investigation. And if you don't do an investigation, I'll do the investigation myself. So there are very, very strong letters from her. She's not afraid to argue, but you see her fearlessness. And so all that also reveals another dimension of Ila Gandhi.
Wow.
Beautiful. Yes, Ila's a powerhouse. When you walk with Ila, I mean, that was my first meeting with her. I said to her, I said, firstly, I feel the presence of the settlement. I feel it. I said, Ila, I feel it right here. I can just feel the presence of it. There was a softness. The wind was blowing gently as we walked through. And all those big trees and, there was just something about it. When you go to a place, it's been spoken about a lot and it's historical and it has a huge story and you open yourself up to feel, you will feel. But Ila added another dimension to it as she walked us through the museum and the property itself. And I mean, she's a walking textbook, as you would know, Uma. And I just said to myself, oh my gosh, Ila has the kind of spirit that's rare. It's empowering, it empowers, and it's so powerful. And as you said, the beautiful, soft, very soft demeanor is, it's not the whole story. The full Ila, uh, especially as I've gotten to know her through the years and her story, the depth of it, her losses, her tragedies. This is no ordinary woman. And she represents practically all our women in South Africa. We are not ordinary women. The story, and for those of us born, well, from the apartheid years to now, we know the struggle. We know the tragedy. Rory, you're much, much younger. You're the baby in the group today. So, but still, you are rich in your knowledge of the history. As a thespian, you have not only studied your art, you've gone and absorbed yourself into the history of the land of your birth. So much so, you can tell the story with such deep meaning like Uma is. And Uma's lived a lot of this history. And so have I, because we're much older than you are. But this is South Africa. This is the South Africa. And this is our world. This is our world right now. And that's why the voices are so relevant. It's so powerful because these are the voices like ours that are being threatened, are being shut down permanently. And therefore the resistance. And I know your great grandmother was a remarkable woman, as Ila told us when we went into the museum. There's a whole wall dedicated to her. And she even told us this is the only Gandhi museum where her story is told. She died while imprisoned. And very few people know, especially with making the kadi and all of that. Ila described it in detail. And my life was forever changed after that day. I had a very different upbringing from both of you. However, it's so much like yours. You have no idea. That's the beautiful part of our stories. This is why we're connected. So the next question is for Rory-san. So, Rory, what is the significance of this play in today's social and political climate?
Well, I think firstly I wanted to say it's such an honor to meet you, Prof. Uma. I mean, this is an incredible blessing for me just to be able to meet you and to hear your story. And thank you so much for sharing. It's I feel very honored. So thank you very much. The significance of the story, Michelle, unfortunately, as I said before, the story still resonates because ultimately, as women, as females in this country, we are still fighting for our freedoms. We're still fighting for our autonomy. We're still fighting for our bodies to be respected, for our presence to be honored and compensated in the same way as male counterparts. And so whilst this particular play, was based, on the movement, on the march of these incredibly courageous women in 1956, I saw when pupils, when 17-year-olds would come and watch the play, how moved they were by it. And unfortunately, it resonated with them, because you recognize that sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same, because you still have girls and women fighting, marching, protesting, furious, angry, having the urge, the need, the duty to stand up for themselves, and stand up for their sisters, for their mothers, for their grandmothers, for their children. So a play like this just reminds us that where we came from, what our foundation was, what the strength of this peaceful but very determined and serious march and movement was, how far we have come, and also how far we still need to go in order to truly live a life that is unburdened by oppression. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Rory. And Rory-san, how does storytelling, whether in history or on stage, play a role in challenging injustice?
Well, because, with storytelling, because it is a creative space, and it is a space where one activates the imagination, and your imagination is not just what's in your mind, it's also what's in your heart, and it's also what your lived experiences are informing. What it does with storytelling is that you can look at the world, you can consider what laws have been passed, what realities that we live in, and you tell that story through a lens where you can actually elicit and inspire change, where you can provoke constructive criticism of the world that we live in, where you can say, are we going to accept this or are we not? And I think it is through that messaging, it's almost a way that we creatively condition ourselves to question our world, to question and interrogate, are we happy? To also embrace joy. Storytelling isn't just about expressing the trauma and ways that we need to grow. It's also about relishing in our strength as a people. So through this prism of storytelling, we're able to live, we're able to question, we're able to love and express, and we're also able to interrogate, and as it is, protest. We're able to say something. We're also then able just to preserve, which is why Prof. Uma's book is so important. Preserve the stories, preserve the history, to make sure that that is nurtured, that is archived, so that my nieces and my nephew, they still understand where we have come from. And even though the world may look different with technology, and their childhood may be different to mine, may be different to yours, but where do we come from? And it is through storytelling that maintains, because AI is going to do what it's going to do, and we're not necessarily in control of that. We're not the captains of those industry, but we can be the sort of captains of where we come from, and what we need to do. And that's what storytelling does, and that's the power of it.
Thank you for that, Rory-san. And I love what you just alluded to, that we can protect our humanity this way.
Yes, absolutely.
We are in charge as long as we keep the creative side going, and the resistance. The resistance will never stop. I think it will never stop. We will always have to resist, because evil is always prevalent in the world. So, Uma, the next questions for you. How do these letters challenge or deepen our understanding of Gandhi's African years?
So, the book doesn't only contain letters. So in the first chapter that I write, it is a chapter written by myself using a lot of sources. That chapter is a very long chapter. It's about 53 pages, and it analyzes Phoenix settlement in Gandhi's era. So it is the foundation of the book. And the letters then tell the story about what happened after he left. So I think to focus on that particular chapter and what it does. So there were, it responds to the historiography, and it says, so what is Gandhi's legacy for South Africa? And, you know, in some of the earlier books, there's a lot of focus on Gandhi's and even in the public sphere on what was Gandhi's relationship with Africans. And so in this chapter, one of the things that is revealed is the way in which Phoenix settlement was so well integrated in the Inanda region. So John Dubé's Oshlange Institute was actually just a few kilometers away from Phoenix settlement. It actually can be seen from Phoenix settlement. So there were very close relationships between the residents of the farm and Oshlange Institute. They knew what each other were doing. If there were new buildings going on, if there was a function going on, there was more interchange between these two institutions than has been previously recognized. Furthermore, Indian opinion did not exclude the various grievances that Africans also endured. So the chapter then looks at, all the articles that appeared in Gandhi's newspaper in that time, the 1913 Land Act, the Women's Pass laws, and you will see that the struggle against the African pass laws by women inspired Gandhi to bring women into resistance. And so that also emerges there. But the biggest story that comes from this chapter is how every single aspect of what is known as Gandhiism emerged from Phoenix settlement, whether it's Satyagraha, whether it's the role of the alternate press, whether it is about creating a new society, even his diet. When he lived at Phoenix, he wrote a 11-part series on what to eat, on health, and in advocating walking, advocating a vegan diet. All this starts from Phoenix settlement. It's the place where he took his vow of celibacy. So I think the book makes a contribution in understanding, people talk about Gandhi's stay in South Africa in very broad terms. He lived in Durban and he lived in Johannesburg and just a few years at Phoenix settlement. But the book shows how every single idea emanated when he was at the settlement.
Mm. Wow.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you very much for that, Uma, because when I was a guest at the settlement, Ela focused on your grandmom, Kasturba, is that her name?
Yes.
And she told us that Kasturba became very, very ill, gravely ill. In fact, she almost died. And then your grandfather stopped all the doctors from treating her. To put it into a nutshell, it's in the documentary. Actually, Ela tells the story in detail. So Rorisang, you'll find this very interesting.
Yeah.
Because this is how natural medicine can heal you as well. And this is Uma's great grandfather's way of looking at the world. Especially, remember they were living in very funny times. Even going to a hospital or a doctor became a political situation. Am I right, Uma? So all of that, he had his knowledge because he read widely. He read about medicine and he read about, alternate healing, and just through eating and foods, that kind of thing. And Kasturba was a vegetarian, a vegan. So the doctor told her she must eat beef soup. So she said, I would rather die than eat beef soup. So Gandhiji, what he did was, as Ela said it, he prepared a whole new diet and a whole new way of living for her. Medicine-wise. It all came from natural herbs, and he made poultices and all kinds of things. And she survived. She was actually going, the doctor said, well, if you don't want me to treat her, she's going to die. She will be dead in a short while. And she would have, because she was gravely ill. But when she went onto the Gandhian principle of healing and nature and just natural healing, she lived for 40 years after that.
Oh,
She
wow.
died imprisoned in South Africa. She died
In India. In India.
was she imprisoned
Yeah,
in
she was
India?
staying in a big palace in India, the Aga Khan's palace. But she and Gandhi were both imprisoned in that palace. They couldn't get out of it. And so she died as a prisoner of the British.
Sure.
I thought she died here. So she
No,
died.
no, she died in India in 1944.
So they moved in 1944. Wow. My mom was born in 1943. So wow, 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 wow. So she
Wow.
died in prison in India.
Yes.
But that wouldn't have been because she became ill from the illnesses that she was cured of here on the set.
No, no. At Phoenix Settlement, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned all this health and nature cure. At Phoenix Settlement, that is another aspect, that it was occupied by people who believed in nature cure, hydrotherapy. And there are many examples. He treated Kasturba, he treated his own son, he treated the other residences. They did hip baths. And so it was not taking, medicines as we know it, but relying on nature to cure.
Mm.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And the fact that she lived 40 years beyond what that doctor said was proof that whatever he was doing worked. So,
Mm.
Rorisang, we need to go more to nature to get healed. You know?
Absolutely. 100%.
I'm just, I was very fascinated because, Ela was describing it like you do. In fact, you speak a bit like her because she described it so much like you are speaking right now. And I was absorbed. And that is why my iPad and iPhone were whipped out to record her. I hadn't planned on it. And I was even running out of battery life that day. But I said, no, 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 I'm going to be filming her. And I used my husband's phone as well. And I think I stuffed up his memory because I was just filming and filming. I was gathering all the footage. I wanted as much as I could. And this information is valuable, absolutely valuable. So, Uma, can you share an untold story from the letters that stand out? Something that perhaps wasn't supposed to be shared at that time, but you feel comfortable to share.
Yeah. So one of the letters, which is one of my favorite letters, so you see, when Gandhi formed the settlement, he formed it with a group of friends who were like-minded as him. So Albert West was the person who left Johannesburg and went to the Phoenix settlement to run the newspaper. And so this was going to be a settlement where 60 people were living on it. So Gandhi leaves in 1914, and a lot of the residents actually leave with him. Albert West is one of the few people who remains at the settlement. So my book actually the letters start from 1915, and Albert West writes the angriest letters, angry at Gandhi, angry at all the people who left, angry at his circumstances. And one of the first things he says, if you think this is a settlement, it's not a settlement at all. How do you expect us to do justice to agriculture and running the newspaper? This land is not fertile. We can't grow the pineapples. Our yields are too less. How can I work in the press and work on the farm? And then he criticizes Gandhi. This is really interesting because it's not, he doesn't relate to Gandhi as somebody superior to him, as a saint or whatever. Gandhi is his equal. And so it's his friend. And so he writes and he says, you have the misunderstanding that because you have achieved all this, that we will just follow along with you. And so he criticizes Gandhi. And I found that to be so refreshing, it throws light on the difficulties of running Phoenix settlement. And that is actually the central untold story of the book, which now gets told, is that those who were left at Phoenix settlement what were their difficulties in living up to the ideals, how to run a newspaper without advertisements, how to run it as not a commercial enterprise, but how to survive at Phoenix Settlement. So the book is about survival, to the difficulties of Indian opinion continuing right until 1961. All the letters about the financial struggles to run this newspaper. So I think this book highlights the way in which Phoenix Settlement was run, after Gandhi left. So that is the big story, to focus on the people who were responsible for running the settlement. The told story is what Gandhi did, and the untold story is what everybody else did.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Uma. And Rorisang, I'm now bringing it back to you. How does this play connect with the younger generation?
I believe this play connects with the younger generation because, firstly, just as an academic study, it's important that people know the drama students. It's what they're studying. Also, because a lot of what drama students studied, it's a lot of theatre and drama work performed by male performers. This play is an all-female cast, an all-female ensemble, and there are actually very few pieces of theatre that actually talk to this incredible moment of this march in 1956. And what we realized in 1956, is before Sharpeville, before, the Soweto riots. And so this was really one of the moments in our movement that catapulted a lot of action and a lot of international attention to what we were going through in this country. And so how it is resonating with the youth, because I remember one of the young women who came to watch the play, she came to me and she said, she said to me, I'm astounded by the story. I didn't know all of the details of the story. I wasn't taught it. And so for me, that was also just an eye-opening situation of, no, we need to continue to tell the story, but how it's resonating is also just to remind the youth that the angst, the anguish, the frustration that they are all going through it hasn't began with them. It didn't start with them. Unfortunately, they've inherited generations of what we've had to go through, and so to understand that what is happening is that the baton is now being handed onto them and to them to continue to fight for women's rights. But we've never stopped. We've never not fought. We've always stood in courageous situations with literal guns pointed at our heads to fight for what is right and to fight for our freedoms and for our autonomy. So it's not starting with them. They're just continuing this legacy. And that's what's important for people to understand. And that's what the play talks about, is that it wasn't just, it talks about these three incredible women who are selling at a market. They're selling chickens and eggs and oranges and fruit. These are what you call your everyday woman, and it goes through 90 minutes of what their lives were, and their lives still had to continue. They still had to raise their husbands and run their homes, as well as protest against this government. So what the life was like then and what we're doing now, we have to continue to live, but we cannot ever leave what we're fighting for too far and too away from our top of mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Rory. So Rorisang, as a writer, director, and an actress who has worked in Africa, can I say? I'm not sure whether you've worked in other parts of Africa, but I know you have worked extensively in the West, especially in the US.
Yes.
You studied in California at Barron Brown, you studied in New York, and you've directed in New York. In fact, a year ago, you co-directed with Dr. Ricardo Khan. You co-directed Fences, a very prestigious position for you because you worked with Emmy Award cast and crew on that production. So having this experience of working across continents, um, you know, how do you balance those roles when you are working on a production like this? Because this is a very deep production. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So how do you balance those roles?
You know, what I'm very lucky about is that, you know, as you mentioned, I direct, but I also write, and I'm an actress also. So the balancing comes because I'm able to bring all of those, you know, skills that are in my toolbox to this particular kind of work. And so the benefit for me as a director, my sort of personality and ethos as a director is that I'm able to completely sympathize with what the actors are going through, you know, of how difficult it is to immerse yourself. And it's also it's almost a process of osmosis when you're an actor. You have to just take it on and let it overtake you. And I understand that process completely. And theaters is possibly the most difficult medium that a performer can engage in, because it's live, right? And because the energy of the audience will feed into your energy, and if you make a mistake, you have to recover immediately. You know, there's nothing more high pressure and high stakes like that.
Mhm.
So I can relate to that. So the kinds of conversations that I can have with my actors, about the work, about performance, about staying in the moment. That's what I can bring to it. And then as a director, I'm able to have that eye, have that vision, you know, of what the audience is experiencing. As a writer, I'm able to do text analysis with them and really engage in them. And does this text work? Because I can hear it, I can imagine myself writing it, because I've written plays, and it always starts in the heart and the head first, and then it's externalized, you know. So I believe that because of all of those skills that I have, therefore theatre making, as challenging as it is, I believe that um, I'm able to add and contribute in those kinds of ways, and collaborate with my actors to, and the crew, of course, the lighting, the sound, to bring the work to life, you know, and hold the attention of people. You know, we're in a world where we can't sit for 5 minutes without looking at our phones, you know. And so the theater, because of the policy of the theater, you can't have your phone out, you can't take pictures, you have to sit still. You know, if you're late, you can't come in. You have to just focus on the work, and that's what makes it so special for us to engage in. You know.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Rory-san. So, Uma, Gandhi arrived in South Africa as a young lawyer and he left as the Mahatma. How pivotal was the Phoenix settlement in shaping his philosophy on satyagraha?
So, you know, Satyagraha started in the Transvaal. It was all about the registration that Indians had to undergo. And so, you know, the tendency would be to say, what, you know, did Phoenix settlement have a role or not? And it actually played a very critical part in Satyagraha because of the newspaper. So the newspaper was at Phoenix settlement. The struggle was in the Transvaal. But Gandhi himself said that without Indian opinion, there would have been no satyagraha, because
Mm,
he used this medium to explain what satyagraha is, nonviolent struggle. What happens when the police arrest you? What should you do? What should you do about taking the registration certificates? If you don't take it, what's going to happen to you? So there's this regular Johannesburg letter that Gandhi writes. He is in Johannesburg, but is published at Phoenix Settlement. The name Satyagraha also evolves from residents at Phoenix Settlement. It was suggested by one of the residents there. And then Phoenix Settlement changes as the Satyagraha struggle develops. So it is now more than just the newspaper and the work that the paper's doing. But Gandhi changed the goal of Phoenix Settlement from being a place that housed the workers of the press to being a Satyagraha farm. So in other words, the life of those living on the settlement was now about how to grow resistors, to train young people to become future resistors. So the lifestyle at Phoenix became harder. If you had to go to prison, how are you going to go to prison if you're used to luxurious food and luxurious surroundings? So everything became simpler and more difficult because he saw this in a holistic way, that if you can control your body and you can control your senses and so forth, you would be strengthening your character, and it would allow you to develop that fearlessness to become a resistor. And so this is how Phoenix settlement changed into a satyagraha farm. What was education about? Education was about service, and education was about building yourself for that service. And eventually, linked to the African women's resistance from Phoenix settlement, you had for the very first time women taking part in the resistance. So Kasturba and other women who resided at Phoenix settlement left to go and cross borders and to be imprisoned.
Wow. So, Uma, if the Mahatma was alive today, how do you think that he would evolve his philosophy to fit modern challenges, especially with what we're facing as a world and what we're seeing happening in the US today, where basic human rights are being threatened in our faces practically? What would he have done?
So, as I said earlier, that I think his ideas were for all times. So this the crux of Gandhiism that can't change. It is a universal values of how to live life, and I think that would remain the same. But in terms of what is going on in South Africa, in terms of what is going on in the world, there's a lot of relevance for what he did. Is that when there is injustice, you need to stand up. So to Americans who are living under the worst possible presidency, and for the world who's watching this, so what should Americans do in situations like this? Well, one, if you are opposed to what Trump is doing, you need to speak out. And do so bravely without fear of repercussions. Universities in America are under pressure, of funds and so forth. But it takes a very brave person to actually say, we will not bend down. There are people, postgraduate students, doctors, attached to universities who are being persecuted. And I would say if that happened in South Africa, there would be an absolute outcry. And so one needs to see more of that in America, that the voices of those opposed to this needs to drown out the devastating policies that are being implemented, against migrants, against Palestine, So I would say, had Gandhi been alive, he would have spoken loudly about it, resisted it. And in circumstances like this, you need resistance from below, fearless resistance, so that you challenge the status quo, which is unjust. So I think that's the way in which his philosophy has relevance. And one key part of his philosophy is that one must always retain the moral high. So you don't react in ways in which your oppressor is reacting, but you keep your moral strength and your moral being and the way in which you respond. You respond by keeping the higher ground, and that will ultimately win. If you deteriorate to the level of the oppressor, then, it's not a just struggle.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Uma. And so, Rory, do you want to contribute to that?
No, I think that's so important because, what we see is, happening in the United States and other parts of the world is really so devastating. And understanding that, we are a global community. So we can't turn away. And because as South Africans, we have such huge humanity in us also. So we are able to understand and see what's horrifically happening in America. We're able to protest against what's happening in Palestine, and then we're able to march for what's happening here in our country, against like a 7-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted. We have the capacity for that, and so that must remain. And so I completely concur with what Prof was saying, that it has to be vocal. It has to be our dissatisfaction has to be heard. It has to be something that we literally speak out and stand for, and we say this is not going to happen, not on our watch, because if we don't do anything, then it's going to continue.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Bold voices, women of resistance. That's what we need, and may it filter out into the world from here. So Uma, where can we find your book?
The book is, it's not so freely obtainable at the bookstores, but if you're in Durban, it's actually at the 1860 Heritage Centre. You can pick up books. If you're in Cape Town, it's at Clark's Bookstore, and it can be ordered directly from African Sun Media, which is in Stellenbosch. So, it's not, for instance, in exclusive books. It can also be obtained, you don't have to buy the 600-page book. I can barely hold it in my hands, but it's very easily obtainable from the publisher as an ebook. I'm hoping that, the distribution will get better, and that, you should be able to pick it up at any bookstore. But at the moment, it's a bit slow in the distribution.
Is it on Amazon?
It's not yet on Amazon. And so that is something that the publishers need to work on quite urgently, to get it on Amazon, so that it would have, be ordered in America and in England and in other parts of the world.
We need. And if you do want it to get to Amazon quickly, there is a company I can connect you with in Cape Town. They can do that for you maybe in a week, and have it out there, because I think right now they are desperate. They need it.
Yes.
And well done to you. It was, and I hope your distribution picks up as the days go by, because I would love to see that book in as many South African hands as possible, especially in dealing with what we would call today the bad publicity, the adverse publicity that your great-grandfather received. It was a different time, and the transition from Mohandas to the Mahatma, it was an important transition. And all human beings, we are all changing, even those of us who in some way have recorded our mistakes of the past or whatever. Transition is so important, because when the person changes, and his change was so meaningful, and it was huge, because look how it's affected the world. People just remember the Mahatma. I watched Seinfeld. I mean, I'm still watching Seinfeld after all these years. And he was mentioned in Seinfeld. I'm sure they would have asked the family for permission. But the thing is, he's become, in his own way, after all these years, a century and more later, some kind of a brand. He is mentioned in practically every movie I watch. The Mahatma. Who doesn't know the Mahatma? And well done to you and your entire family. I have the deepest respect for preserving that history, because the preservation of one's family history is, well, to me, that's the greatest sign of wealth. That you keep your family history. And therefore, I have very little respect for people who try to run people out of families. I think it's the height of cruelty. Nobody should do that. And whoever tries that and has done that, they need to learn satyagraha. It's a peaceful concept. If you want to resist peacefully. And inclusion always. The whole Gandhian principle, or all the principles, were based on inclusion. And people who separate development offends me. because it speaks of isolating people, like imprisonment. It is imprisonment. Once you can, we don't accept that. So Rorisang, this play has done so well in Johannesburg.
Yes.
Everybody's talking about you strike a woman, you strike a rock. So when are you bringing it to the Western Cape? And do you have plans to take it internationally?
I always have plans. I always have plans.
Western Cape, I meant around the country. You see, I live
Yes,
in, sometimes I think this place is a country. Some people want it to be a country.
they do. They
They do.
do. Um, we definitely are in really amazing talks to travel with the play. So we're going to start here in Johannesburg. We're going to stage it again at the Red Hill Festival, and then we actually have plans to go to the Durban Playhouse. That just needs to be official for us to kind of get that going. And then from there, we're going to travel as much as we possibly can. There has been some European interest in the play also because it's even though some of the language in the play isn't in English, it still translates. You still completely understand what is being said and what is being experienced. So it's always a hope and a prayer as a theatre maker that your show will get on the road and travel. And so right now, the Joburg Theatre is busy working to make that happen. And I promise you, Michelle, I'll do the best that I can to bring it to you, and to bring it to Prof. Uma also. That would be an honor to have you both watch it, for sure.
Then my other dream is to see your play at the
Yes,
Kennedy Center in DC. I would
absolutely.
love.
I think your dream is going to happen. I think and so it is. Thank you.
See it, yeah. At the Kennedy Center in DC. That's where I want to see your play. I think if it's there, I'll come see it too. So
If that's the bar, then that's what I'll work towards. Then I'll be like, Michelle's not coming unless it's here. So that's what we need to do.
we want, and if you could have any historical figure watch your play, who would it
Yes.
be? And what do you hope they would say?
Wow, that's such a great question. You know, I would love it if the women who actually marched in 1956, if they could watch this play. That would be everything for me, because it is because of them that this play even exists. It is because of them that movement really began and gained momentum. And I would want them to feel honored. I'd want them to understand that we have not forgotten them, that we continue to value their contribution, and that to understand that there are many people a part of the movement and many people who were, the lieutenants, so to speak. But a lot of what changed was the soldiers on the ground. And these women were the soldiers for that movement. In many ways. So for me, if they, because they are historical figures also,
Yes.
they are the historical figures. So for me, if they could watch this play and just for them to see, 50 years later, we still remember what you did, and we just want to say thank you, and it was not in vain, and it has changed all of our lives. That would be then my work is done. That would be wonderful for me. Yeah, if I could, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a lot more than 50 years.
Yeah.
It's a lot more, yeah.
Yeah.
That was 1956.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they could be because this is their movement, their story.
This is their story. They own it. And
Story.
well, thank you both. You've both been beautiful guests. And
Thank you.
so you both know that's what the People of Purpose talk show is all about. It's to give voice to real people with authentic and real and meaningful stories
Yes.
that are changing the world. Your stories are changing the world. And Uma, we've got to get your book moving fast. I will talk to you about that, how it can be done. And I'll link you to the various channels as well, because your book, as you say, if it's on Amazon, even they've got there is another, I forget the name of it, but I'll ask this group of people linked to publishers, they will get it into this one company, and then all the bookstores across the United States and perhaps in the UK as well, and wherever else in the world they're linked to, they will all have access to your book, which would be fantastic. And you just subscribe to one platform. So it's been wonderful talking to the two of you. And this is going to be one phenomenal recording, and I'm sure people have been watching on Facebook as well. To everybody who's connected on Facebook, thank you. And I hope you're all as blessed as I am. These are two wonderful, phenomenal women who are still doing great things in their lives. And they just haven't stopped with the one great thing. They keep doing greater things. And that's what it's all about. So thank you both very much, and God bless. Uma, I'd like to be in touch with you since we are neighbors in the Western Cape.
I think we have a lot to talk about.
We have a lot, especially since some people are planning to make this a country.
Yeah.
So the resistance goes on, hey? It goes on and on and on. And Rory, I'd love to link the two of you because
Yes.
I think so.
Yes, please. Absolutely. That'd be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Rorisang tells a story from the voice of the theater, which is so important. Thank you both. God bless.
Thanks so much.
And I hope to see you both soon. We'll chat on WhatsApp. Take care.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.